Nothing in life is free, and that's not a complaint. It's a law. If something looks free, it simply means the cost is hidden, delayed, or carried by someone else. Someone paid with their time, their focus, their body, their nervous system, or years of learning, and that's still payment. Today, I want to break down why everything in life is energetically balanced, why money is nothing more than concretized energy, and why we live in a strange contradiction where people happily pay premium prices for things they don't need, yet resist paying for the very things that support their health, stability, clarity, and growth. We'll also talk about something that most people don't want to hear, how chasing cheap, discounts, or free can quietly sabotage you rather than serve you. This isn't about judging money or glorifying it. It's about understanding how energy actually works. Let's get started. In nature, energy is never created or destroyed. It moves, transfers, and balances. Human life follows the same principle. Every benefit requires an input. Every outcome draws energy from somewhere. Every decision has a cost, whether you acknowledge it or not. When people say, "This should be free," what they're often saying underneath is, "I don't want to be the one who carries the cost." They want the result without the responsibility that makes the result sustainable. You see this constantly in everyday life. Someone avoids investing in their health because it feels expensive or inconvenient. They skip preventative care, ignore stress, push their body beyond its limits and tell themselves they'll deal with it later. And later arrives, usually in the form of chronic fatigue, medical bills, lost time, or reduced quality of life. The cost never disappeared. It was simply deferred. The same pattern shows up in relationships. People avoid honest conversations because they're uncomfortable, so they pay later with resentment. They avoid setting boundaries because they don't want conflict, and then they pay with burnout. They avoid making hard decisions early and end up paying with collapse instead of discomfort. Life always balances the books. If you don't pay with awareness and intention, you pay with consequences. Money is often treated as something evil, dirty, or morally charged, but in reality, it's actually very simple. Money represents stored life force. Behind every unit of currency is someone's time, their learning curve, the mistakes they paid for, and the capacity they had to build to deliver what you're receiving. You're not paying for an object or for an hour. You're paying for the energy it took to make it possible. Take something ordinary, like food. A loaf of bread isn't just flour and water. It represents the farmer who cultivated the grain, the years it took them to learn how to do that well, the baker who refined their craft, the early mornings, the equipment, the electricity, the rent, the systems holding it all together. Now apply that to less tangible things like teaching, therapy, healing, or spiritual guidance. You're not paying for words, time slots, or techniques. You're paying for someone's accumulated capacity, their ability to see clearly, hold complexity, regulate their nervous system, and guide others without collapsing under the weight of what they're holding. This is why ancient cultures embedded exchange into spiritual life. Offerings, tithing, and energy exchange weren't about greed. They were about respect and balance. When energy circulates cleanly, wisdom stays alive instead of becoming distorted or depleted. Now, here's one of the biggest contradictions in modern life. People routinely spend large amounts of money on things they don't need. Designer clothes, upgraded phones, cars that exceed their functional purpose, holidays placed on credit, and entertainment subscriptions that barely get used. Those prices are rarely questioned. But mention paying for therapy, education, healing work, or spiritual development, and resistance appears almost immediately. Suddenly, it becomes expensive. Suddenly, it should be free. And suddenly, there's moral discomfort. Why? Because luxury reinforces identity. It feeds image, status, and external validation. It says, "This is who I am." Inner work does the exact opposite. It challenges identity. It requires responsibility. It asks you to change patterns instead of decorate them. Luxury is consumption. Growth is confrontation. One gives a dopamine hit now, and the other asks for long-term engagement. There's a common belief that if something is essential for living, it should be freely available. On the surface, that sounds compassionate, but compassion without sustainability collapses systems. Food isn't free. Even the most basic food requires land, labor, knowledge, transport, and energy. Clean water requires infrastructure, protection, and maintenance. Education requires teachers who are emotionally and mentally resourced enough to teach. When people say that these things should be free without acknowledging the energy behind them, what they're really saying is, someone else should absorb the cost so that I don't have to. That mindset slowly drains the very systems people claim to care about. It's why healers burn out, teachers leave professions, caregivers become exhausted, and quality declines over time. True compassion includes energetic sustainability. Now, there's a big difference between being financially conscious and being energetically cheap. When someone constantly hunts for the lowest price, free options, or heavy discounts, they often don't realize what they're training themselves to believe, that support should cost as little as possible. Think about how free things are usually treated. Free advice is skimmed, free courses are half-watched, free resources pile up unused. There's no engagement, no commitment, and no embodiment. Now think about something you paid properly for. You showed up differently. You listened more carefully. You applied what you learned because you were invested. Not emotionally, but energetically. The price didn't create the value. It was your energetic participation that did. When something is consistently underpaid, the exchange weakens. The provider becomes drained or resentful. The recipient doesn't fully engage, and the outcome becomes diluted. Discounts themselves aren't the issue. Identity is. When someone identifies as, I always want it cheaper, life often reflects that back as lower quality experiences, weaker support, and constant dissatisfaction. We live in a time where information is everywhere, yet real transformation is surprisingly rare. People read books, watch videos, listen to podcasts, and collect insights, yet months or years later, their lives look largely the same. They know more language, more concepts, and more theories, but their patterns haven't shifted. That's because information alone doesn't create change. Responsibility does. Free content is easy to consume without commitment. There's no structure holding you accountable and no energetic consequence if you ignore it. You can agree with it, feel inspired for 10 minutes, and then return to the same habits without friction. Think about how people treat free advice in everyday life. Someone tells you to stretch more, drink water, rest properly, or set boundaries. You nod, you agree, and then you don't do it. There's no energetic weight behind the suggestion. Now compare that to something you paid for, a course, a therapist, a program, or even a coach. You carved out time. You showed up even when you didn't feel like it. You paid attention because ignoring it would mean wasting your own energy. Payment creates participation. Not because money is magical, but because exchange anchors intention. When you invest your resources, you unconsciously tell your nervous system, this matters. And what matters gets integrated. This is why free content often creates intellectual growth, but not embodied change. Transformation requires friction, engagement, and responsibility, not just access. One of the biggest misunderstandings in spiritual and healing spaces is the belief that money somehow contaminates wisdom, care, or service. This usually comes from the idea that anything spiritual should be pure, while money and the material world are something to be ashamed of. But that way of thinking isn't spiritual, it's disconnection. Real spirituality integrates the material and the energetic. It understands that spirit still moves through bodies, nervous systems, schedules, bills, and finite human capacity. When spiritual or healing work is expected to be free as a rule, what often follows is not purity, but depletion. Healers overgive, teachers exhaust themselves, Practitioners dilute their work to survive. Eventually, the depth that people claim they want quietly disappears. Receiving is not about greed. Receiving is regulation. A practitioner who's properly supported can remain grounded, present, and clear. They can continue learning, refining their craft, caring for their own health, and holding space without resentment or collapse. And that stability directly benefits the people they serve. Historically, wisdom traditions understood this. Teachers were supported by communities. Exchange wasn't optional. It was how knowledge stayed alive rather than becoming distorted or lost. Money doesn't corrupt spiritual work. Avoiding money often creates martyrdom, burnout, and unconscious power imbalances. Now let's look at the other side of this conversation, because this is where things get subtle. When healers, teachers, therapists, or guides consistently give away their work for free, something happens energetically, and it's rarely what people expect. At first, it could look generous, kind, selfless, and maybe even noble. But over time, the energetic balance starts to distort. The practitioner starts to overextend. Their nervous system is constantly giving without being properly replenished. Resentment can creep in quietly. Even if they consciously believe they're happy to help, their capacity shrinks, not because they care less, but because the system supporting them is collapsing. At the same time, the recipient often unconsciously devalues what they're receiving, not out of malice, but because there's no energetic anchor. When people don't invest anything, they tend not to integrate anything. This creates an unhealthy dynamic where the giver feels drained and the receiver remains unchanged. Free, in this context, doesn't equal loving. It often equals unsustainable. Saying that, there is a time and place for offering work freely, but it must come from clarity, not guilt or obligation. Giving freely is energetically clean when it's a conscious choice, not a pattern of avoidance around receiving. The giver is resourced, regulated, and not self-sacrificing. The offering is time-bound or clearly contained. There's no hidden expectation of recognition, loyalty, or validation. For example, offering a free session as an introduction, supporting someone in a crisis, contributing work as part of a balanced community exchange, or giving when you genuinely feel full rather than depleted. In these cases, the energy flows because the giver is choosing to circulate surplus, not draining their reserves. Problems arise when free becomes the default instead of the exception. True service does not require you to sacrifice yourself. Balanced exchange protects both the healer and the healing. The bottom line is this: you will pay for everything in life, and that part is non-negotiable. The only real choice you have is how you pay. You can pay consciously with intention, clarity, and respect for energy. Or you can avoid the exchange up front and let life collect later through exhaustion, resentment, missed opportunities, or lessons that arrive far louder than necessary. When you understand that money is simply energy made visible, something shifts. You stop seeing payment as loss and start seeing it as participation. You realize that choosing to invest in your health, your growth, your healing, and your education is not indulgent. It's responsible. Balanced exchange doesn't just support the person you're paying. It strengthens you. It sharpens your commitment. It keeps energy moving instead of leaking out sideways through frustration and stagnation. Nothing is free, but everything can be aligned. When you respect energy, it meets you with support. When you honor exchange, life responds with momentum instead of resistance. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, you need to watch my other video, You don't get what you want, you get what you are, where I explain why life responds to how you show up, not just what you say you want. Until next time, take care, choose your exchanges consciously, and always stay inspired.